Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Swamp Shadows, Tales from the Tupelos. I'm your host, Mike Richburg. Thank you for joining me. It's funny how I came to find out about the Wateree walking bear, and I want to share that story with you. So make yourself comfortable. I had a Bigfoot experience as a young man, as a young teenager, and it greatly affected me in a number of ways. One, it scared the hell out of me. And two, the other main thing was it generated a tremendous amount of interest from myself, for obvious reasons, for both of those. I didn't tell a lot of people about my experience, especially for many years following. And this occurred in 1978, many years ago. And I didn't talk to many people about it, but I did do a lot of research. And in the early days of my research, a lot of the areas that I was researching were basically in the South Carolina low country, between the Piedmont region and the coast, along the coastal plain and river bottoms. And it still holds true today to a large degree. A lot of good reasons to be in those places if you're into looking for Bigfoot. So that, at the time, was more or less the focus of my research geographically. Well, I finally, for whatever reason, decided to tell my mom and my stepdad one evening. We were sitting around, and I just said, hey, I saw this when I was hunting in the woods, such, in 1978. I saw this gorilla-like animal in the woods, and it scared the crap out of me. And, of course, I was expecting my mama to roll her eyes or something like that. She just looked at me and said, well, I wouldn't doubt it. That's probably about what knocked the trailer off the blocks up at Lake Wateree that night. And I was like, huh? And my stepdad turned and looked and said, yeah, the Wateree walking bear. And I said, huh? Because I was just like, one, I didn't expect anything but ridicule, and I wasn't met with any ridicule. Not only was I not ridiculed, they apparently thought this was no big deal and kind of already, knew there was something going on there. And I said, the what? The Wateree walking bear. And then my mama spoke up again and said, yeah. Me and, my stepdad, she said, they were asleep. It's like in the wee hours of the morning. They had this mobile home up at Lake Wateree. I was a little kid at the time, and I wasn't staying with them that night. They were up there sleeping hard in the middle of the night. And at the time, and I asked them about what year it was, and the best they could figure, it was probably around 1969. Well, at the time, there wasn't many people around there at all. Now, if you go up there today where this is at, there's people all up and down there. But the power company did not start selling lakefront property on Lake Wateree until around the 60s or 70s, if I'm not mistaken. But at any rate, they're sleeping in the bed, and something hit the trailer so hard, the mobile home there, the little mobile home, did it about knock it off the block, the cement block piers that it's sitting on, and about knocked them out of the bed. Of course, my stepdad scrambles to put on some pants, grab a flashlight, whatever, walk out there, see what's going on. They fully expected maybe to see, a car or something that done run off the road up at the main road and come down the hill and hit the trailer or something. Something obviously terrible happened. And stepdad walks out there. There's no car there. There's nobody around. There's no nothing. There's not a big tree that's fallen against a mobile home or anything like that. He walked all the way around the mobile home and come back to where the end of the high end, where they were sleeping in the bed, kind of was a little bit higher on that end, off the ground, that is. So the piers were a little bit taller down there. And he's looking around, and he shines the light up on the mobile home itself, to get a good look, so maybe see some damage on the mobile home. And the only damage they could see, or he could see at the time, was those two kind of pushed in places, something on the order of about 8 feet apart, up at the top of the mobile home, near where the roof line comes in. And of course, this mobile home had metal siding on it, and it pushed the siding in. There was 2 indentions, and that was it. There was no other sign of anything. So they thought that quite peculiar, to say the least. Eventually, they got on in there and went to sleep, and it did, in fact, upset the mobile home stability. So they later had to go back up there. I believe it was the following weekend, they said, and rebuild some of the cement block piers that were on their mobile home to restabilize it or whatever, because it did about knock it. Whatever happened, almost knocked the mobile home down, off the piers. So I was just like, wow, that's incredible. I had no idea. I all this time that I never said anything to them, and they never mentioned it to me or whatever. They didn't really have that reason to. But when I said that, for whatever reason, it triggered my mama's memory and said, oh, yeah, that's probably, what about knocked the trailer off the blocks that night. And my stepdad was like, yeah, he was agreeing with everything Mom was saying and adding stuff, And then Mama looked at me and said, well, that ain't nothing, your stepdad and his brother's done seen it twice up there. And I'm like, what? Really? I mean, what? I mean, I'm sure my eyes were big as saucers, and my eyelids were just blinking the whole time because my mind just kept getting blown over and over again for a series of several minutes here as this was transpiring, because I had no idea any of this was going on, especially with somebody that was I was so close to and talked to on a daily basis. So my stepdad went on to elaborate. He said, yeah, well, it's everybody knows about it, and we go up there hunting, and I kind of knew where they hunted at. I've even been up there hunting with. I no longer hunted at the time, but I'd even been in the general area hunting with him, and they would go up there from time to time over the years, and they've been hunting this same area up around Lake Wateree there for, I don't know, since the 1960s, so it's just where they hunted or whatever for the most part. And they knew the area well and everything. And it was an ongoing, running joke with them. Sometimes they would go hunting, and, they wouldn't see anything, but sometimes it'd be the woods would be real dead, as my stepfather went on to explain. The woods would be dead still and quiet. You wouldn't see nothing. The deer wouldn't be walking. And they'd all get back to the truck later on going home and say, you see anything? No. And then they would blame it on the Wateree walking bear. Say, well, the Wateree walking bear must have been around here today. And all the deer, and just hiding, And, of course, I had a bazillion questions racing through my mind as they're telling me all this, my mom and my stepdad. Totally blowing my mind. And I was like, well, this Wateree walking bear, what do they say about it or whatever, And it's yeah, I mean, the old timers too, always talked about it. It's and even my brother called his name and said he heard him snapping and whistling. And he went on to explain that the Wateree walking bear wears a Robin Hood-looking hat and snaps his fingers and whistles a groovy jazz tune as he walks through the woods. Now, that might sound all rather bizarre. And rightfully so. I mean, it is bizarre. But at the same time, as a long-time Bigfoot researcher, as when he was telling me this, it was flags were going off in my brain, like green flags, like, okay, a Robin Hood type hat. Well, just in real time as he was explaining that, just thinking back to what the Robin Hood hat looks like in my mind, then that sounds an awful lot like the shape of a prominent sagittal crest, which is a widely and commonly reported detail in the morphology or physiology of Bigfoot in many, many Bigfoot reports, and Sasquatch are the same animal, I guess, if you will, depending on what region you're in. But this is a recurring theme, a prominent sagittal crest. It's not always reported, but it is often reported. And if you did have a prominent sagittal crest, and somebody didn't really know what that was, and your head looked funny shaped, and maybe the hair was different on top or something like that, it might look like he was wearing a hat or something. He got something funny on his head. Something's funny about the head, you know. So that kind of checks a little box for me mentally. I'm thinking, that sounds a little bit like a Bigfoot. And you say the thing snaps his fingers, snapping and popping. That's another thing. That's another thing that is often reported with Bigfoot sightings and encounters over the decades. Again and again, you hear like snapping and popping noises for whatever reason. Now, I'd hate to sit here and speculate that the animal is snapping its fingers or popping its lips or whatever it's doing. I don't know. I've never sat there and watched one make a noise like that, so it would be foolish for me to try to speculate too much. But it is a reported common element in many encounters. And the whistling was the same. You know, he whistles all the time. You hear him whistling a jazz tune or something. Now, I don't know about all that, but, you know, there again, whistling is widely reported in a number of Bigfoot reports. It's a common theme, it's a pattern. All those things he said, the Robin Hood hat, the snapping the fingers, and the whistling, I all immediately directly related to Bigfoot characteristics because I recognized the similarity there. Now, of course, over time, and you know, things they get told differently, and people interpret things the best they can and all. So you got to cut some leeway when somebody says Robin Hood hat. You can't just laugh that off. In other words, there's a reason somebody would say something like that. And if they interpreted a funny-looking sagittal crest, or maybe the hair was laying different, so like my man was wearing a Robin Hood hat or something. I don't know. Okay? So something to that matter. So there again, my eyes are probably big as saucers, and my eyes are blinking. And he was telling me how this creature he won't describe is said to look like a bear, kind of. I mean, but it walks upright. You know, so they call it the walking bear. And there's got to be more than one of them because he's seen all over the place up there. So that was a lot for me to absorb. And we sat there and talked about that quite a bit. As you might imagine, as a witness and a long-time researcher, I found all this extremely fascinating. Especially it was coming straight from people that I trusted to no end. You know, my mom and my stepdad. It don't get much closer than that, you know. So I was like, wow, this is fascinating. So I immediately started doing a lot of research, and I kind of changed gears a little bit. Instead of focusing 90% on the low country and those river bottoms down there, I've dedicated a large segment of my research time and resources I could muster to find out more about the Wateree walking bear, because suddenly this was very fascinating. Not long after that, we had went fishing. My stepdad and I had went fishing up there at the lake. And we stopped in this little general store up there. And we was just talking, and my stepdad, just out of the blue, mentioned something to the guy about the hunting or whatever, because, you know, you talk hunting and fishing, that's what most folks do up that way. And it wasn't quite hunting season then, I don't think. I can't remember the time of year exactly. But anyhow, the gentleman was talking to my stepdad. My stepdad said, "Oh yeah," and Mike here, he ain't never heard about the Wateree walking bear. He was like curious about that. And the old man took off talking. Oh, the Wateree walking bear. Oh yes, sir. Boy, they still talking about that. And I just thought like this is cool. I didn't have to work too hard to get this one. So the man just went on to elaborate, and my stepdad and he were talking and about different things, like a long history of it and all that. And my stepdad asked him, well, is there still like current sightings and all? And the man was like, yeah, they see him every now and then, such seen last year, blah, blah, So that there again, and I can't emphasize this enough, them old general stores and them bait and tackle shops out in the country, boy, there's some good information sometimes there floating around. Because those hunters and fishermen types are the people that are out there in the woods to see stuff. And, of course, the first people they're talking to is, where they buying minnows at. So it makes sense, right? So, yeah, the man talked for a while and talked it up a good bit, and that really was something there. That was kind of a special day for me because that man really embraced the Wateree walking bear, and it was just a matter-of-fact kind of thing to him. He heard people talk about it all the time. A lot of people talk about it up and down the country. So over the years, I kept pushing, more and more of my time and spending more and more time up there in that region trying to figure out where I needed to be and looking at, of course, like any good researcher, we look at the history of reports that are publicly available. Those public databases that are out there. All you got to do is Google it. That'll give you kind of a starting point sometimes as far as like geographical areas where there might be a concentration of activity. And obviously with a lot of things like this, activity is distributed widely, but your time's often best spent where there's the most activity and usually the most recent activity. They're mostly around the area of Lake Wateree. There's a pretty strong standing knowledge base there. It's pretty well known amongst the hunting and fishing community and the older folks, the rural population in that area. And of course, we're talking about an area that's basically around Kershaw, Fairfield, and Lancaster counties, if I remember correctly, without looking at the map. So those people out, in this very rural area, those people out in that area around Lake Wateree there are fairly familiar with it. You get outside of that zone, nobody knows what you're talking about. But from the area of about Great Falls up above the lake there, just south to Camden, that's like the hot zone. If you say Wateree walking bear, somebody might know what you're talking about. If you get out of that, most people never heard of it. Even further down the Wateree, and below Camden begins the Colossie Basin, and there's certainly a tremendous amount of Bigfoot activity down that way, but it's not really considered like nobody references it as the Wateree walking bear. They just say a Bigfoot or what have you. So this is like one of those local names that you run into so often for cryptids, whether it's Bigfoot or a lake monster or something else. Some specific geographic regions just have, specific names for the same type of thing that might be reported in another area far away, and it often is. There's one of the curious cases, I like to talk about cases mostly that I have talked to witnesses. Now, there's certainly a lot of reports that are publicly available. Like I say, you can Google it and find reports. and that type of thing. During the course of this show, I often like to reference reports that I know about and I'm taking just because there's a high probability other people have not heard this report, and it'd be good to get it out there. One of the more interesting accounts was a little bit out of zone, kind of like just below Camden near Fort Jackson there. An acquaintance of mine named O'Neill, last name O'Neill, he reached out to me. I didn't know the gentleman at first, but he found out I was into Bigfoot research and that type of thing. It was an odd thing. I want to share this one with you. He, to this date, has not seen a Bigfoot, he don't think, anywhere on the property. But he has some hunting property right there near Fort Jackson, out in the country. There's nobody hardly around anywhere. It's fairly remote. It's directly adjacent to the Cowasee River Basin right there, the Congaree River Basin in the Cowasee. He had a history of little things like bad smells and weird feelings and just, I don't know, the woods ain't right or something like that. One day he was walking around the property, scouting around, and he happens to look under this tree and there's a watermelon sitting there. Now, that might not seem all that unusual, except for a couple things. One, he's pretty sure nobody else was anywhere around there. And for good reason, because, a lot of people ain't got no reason to be trespassing and getting shot at or nothing like that. So if you don't own land out in the middle of nowhere, you probably ain't walking around out there unless you done talk to somebody about it or something. So this is kind of in the middle of nowhere. So there's this watermelon laying there, and it kind of looked, it caught him as a curious thing, and how did this watermelon even get here? Okay, why is there a watermelon here? That's one thing, but how is there a watermelon? Because he went over there and looked at the watermelon carefully. There's no claw marks or anything, so he thought, okay, a bear has pushed a watermelon 7.5 miles from the nearest watermelon patch or whatever. I don't know, that's not really practical, right? So you think, what can carry a watermelon? Well, basically people, right? You got to have something that walks upright to carry a watermelon. It's something sizable. This is a big watermelon. So he pondered that thing and that's when he contacted me, because he started thinking maybe it's some kind of Bigfoot activity. Because if it wasn't a person, and he's pretty convinced it wasn't a person, that had put that watermelon under that tree in the middle of freaking nowhere, far from the road, where there ain't supposed to be nobody messing around on hunting property. It just seemed very odd. So he reached out to me. And I've been in touch with him several times now. And he's had several other weird things go on. He was taking his young daughter to hunt with him on the property. One time they went, and they both just had a really bad vibe. It was one of those times when the woods was just super dead. And they both, even his little girl, felt like she was being watched. They both made that same comment. And he hadn't took her back, but he still hunts there. But there's something weird going on there. But the watermelon thing is very odd. Because, really, there's not many animals that can carry a watermelon. There's just not. And I've racked my brain over that. Basically, it comes down to a human or a Bigfoot. And if there's no humans around, that only leaves one general suspect. So I thought that was very interesting, especially for it not to have any claw marks or anything like that. And it's probably been put there quite recently when he discovered it, or it had been busted up, or the hogs or something would have found it, or whatever. It was worth noting, and it's an odd thing. I just thought that was strange. I've never heard of that before, or really before that never thought about, would a Bigfoot eat a watermelon or whatever, but I don't see why they really wouldn't. There's not much reason they wouldn't as far as I know. It'd probably be a pretty good tasting treat. I certainly enjoy a watermelon on occasion myself. But more around the lake itself, up above Camden, on up in the Great Falls, Highway 97 runs just east of Lake Wateree, and there are a tremendous amount of road crossing sightings. That is probably the second most active stretch of highway that I know of in the state of South Carolina as far as road sightings per mile, or as far as the concentration of road crossing type sightings. And a lot of encounters or sightings in South Carolina are those type of sightings, just because a lot of South Carolina is very wooded, and sometimes you just don't see, half the time if you see a deer, it was crossing the road, So it's just kind of like that. From Liberty Hill on up to Great Falls, and from Liberty Hill on down the county, Liberty Hill seems to be kind of like ground zero for the Wateree walking bear. Highway 97 runs just between Liberty Hill and the lake there. A lot of crosses there and a lot of other encounters. I'd like to share a couple of my more favorite encounters from that area. One of the most compelling and interesting encounters was from a gentleman I did not speak to 2 years after the encounter. The encounter happened in 1999. There's a fellow by the name of Brandon Miles was hunting near Liberty Hill. Matter of fact, he was up there a little bit above Liberty Hill, near the name of a Stoneburrow and Amble Rock, just above Liberty Hill up there. And he had this experience where he was in the deer stand, deer hunting legal and all that good stuff in season, so that would have put him in the fall of the year. I did not ascertain an exact date, as I said, this is several years after the encounter. But he's pretty sure it was 1999. He was in the deer stand, and, as a lot of hunters do, they'll cut like kind of a shooting lane. They call it in a heavily wooded area, you can't see too good, so to enhance visibility, to have like a chance to shoot at something basically in the woods, you'll limb up a few trees or cut down some undergrowth or something and kind of make a long area where you can kind of see a little ways in an otherwise densely compact forested area. And that's a common thing hunters will do. So that, of course, lends visibility. So he's sitting there in a stand, and he hears a bunch of deer coming through the woods, like running. And sure enough, they come over there by his stand, some of them running across this little shooting lane and stuff. He's not sure how many deer it is because there's a bunch of them. It's like 10 or 12 of them maybe, come in there. And they all, the ones he could see, like they stopped over there by his stand, and they're all looking back. They stop and look back the way they had come from. Which he's really excited. Now, he's sitting there looking at does, and if one of them had been a big buck, he might have shot a big buck right then and there. And that's perfectly all right. But they all stopped and looked back the way they was coming. And then back that way, there was a loud break, like a limb break or a crashing sound. And all the deer, again, took off back the way they was running, and kept on going that way. And without making haste, they got on out of there. Well, right behind them come a Bigfoot. The man described it as a dark brown colored upright animal running as fast as the deer were running. And it ran right across his little shooting lane when he was sitting there looking. He seen it good, As fast, it was running fast, but he got to look at it. It scared him really bad, and as soon as that thing got on out of there, he got down and come on home, and he didn't get back no more. He didn't hunt that area no more. There is a lot of game management land that's managed by the government, for hunting purposes in that area in general, all along, around the lake up there. And a lot of those bait and tackle stores and general stores like that are like game checkpoints. So you run into a lot of people that shoot deer or whatever, and if you shoot a deer on public land up there, or I should say on game management land, you're supposed to have it weighed in. What they'll do is they'll like take statistics on the deer. This was a 4-year-old male deer or what have you. And that helps them manage wildlife there. So these places like that really draw a lot of people in that's been out in the woods and go out in the woods. So there again, those bait and tackle stores and those general stores out in the country, that's another reason to get up in there and ask around. People, they hear stuff. If you work in that general store, you hear a lot of stuff them hunters got to say. So Brandon's encounter was very fascinating. So he didn't realize there was a danger factor until he saw the Bigfoot, and then he realized he put it all together. Okay, these deer are all afraid of this Bigfoot, and he's chasing them, and I should probably be afraid too. And as a matter of fact, I am kind of afraid. I think I was going to leave now, and that was that. But he got a pretty dang good look at it. I mean, it was running fast, but still, yeah, he's seen it enough to know that it wasn't a bear and it wasn't a person with a gorilla suit on or anything like that. So I thought that was very interesting. Of course, that happened in 1999. I didn't get to talk to Brandon until years later. Some things like that, it's always best to get it early because people forget small details, And I always tell people this, if you have an encounter, you see something strange, write it down like that day. As soon as you get a chance, as soon as you get home or whatever, pull out a notepad and just write down everything you can remember. Write down every single thing you can remember. Because, you think, geez, I'll never forget that. But 10, 11, 12 years later, whatever, you're like, yeah, some of the details get fuzzy. So write it all down when it happens, as soon as possible, in great detail. A couple more contemporary reports from the region. It would be Sam Dennis's account in 2017. One thing, he was hunting up there just below Liberty Hill, just off of Singleton Creek, which is a pretty well-known creek up that way. It's a prominent creek. A lot of people probably know what that is when I say that from the region. So he was hunting off Singleton Creek up there in 2017, and he encountered a Bigfoot that he never got a good look at, but he could tell it was really big and it scared him. He was looking at it through the trees. But right before and during and after, he reported a terrible smell. A smell so bad he thought he was going to have to stop hunting and just leave the woods. Whatever was going on, he had to go. It was just that bad. And right after he started smelling, he saw this thing walking through the edge of the woods. And he suspects that is indeed, what was the source of the smell that he described as a sewage-like smell. And he said it was very pungent odor that he could not it was like making his eyes burn. It was just a horrible smell that was very, I forget the word he used, but it was an unsavory smell that was not tolerable. It was unsufferable. That's what he said. So, yes, and that's another thing that's often commonly reported with Bigfoot and Sasquatch sightings is a horrible odor. Another really cool sighting was by a couple that was fishing up there, and just above Lake Wateree, there's a little lake that's fed by the Catawba River right there called Fishing Creek Lake. And Doug and Sarah Milton was up there fishing just a couple years ago in 2018. And this is a cool sighting to me because this Fishing Creek Lake, you see, this is not an unpopulated area. There's people living all around in there. there's not a lot of large rural area immediately adjacent to that little lake. You got the town of Great Falls right there. Fort Lawn is right there, and other little settlements and stuff. There's some agricultural things there, and one thing that's going on there's a lot of planted pine trees. And the Miltons was there fishing in that lake in a little cove that was surrounded by these planted pines, and they had that weird feeling like they was being watched. And Sarah had seen the thing first, and she kept trying to point it out to her husband, Doug Milton, but he had trouble, like, for whatever reason, he just couldn't make out where she was saying over in the bushes over there, you know. But he finally seen it, and it just sat there and looked at him. But what they both described was an animal that looked very much like a big gorilla. Dark brown in color, dull-colored, like grayish-looking skin, and it was fairly close. They wasn't exactly sure about how close they was to it, but no more than about 100 feet. So they was close enough to get a pretty good look at it. It was sitting down. It was like apparently squatted down or kneeling down in some bushes on the shore, like observing them. And like I say, Sarah's seen it first, and they're great people, and I love talking with them. And but it was just one of those things where the animals just sitting there, staring at them, just observing. And you know, that's so often the case. People think of Bigfoot as being an intelligent creature, and rightfully so. And being an intelligent creature, it would certainly be curious. So often, it would be the case where just as you would observe something you were curious about, the Bigfoot might observe us if they were being curious about us. So you have a long-standing history of reports over decades up there. I'm not sure how far they go back. That kind of thing's kind of hard to determine sometimes. But at least apparently since the late 60s, when people first started moving around the lake there in any kind of quantity, that's when something almost knocked a little mobile home off the blocks up there that my mom and stepdad were sleeping in. And there's not a lot of good explanations for that because there's no car there, there's no trees there. There's just two pushed-in places up near the top of the mobile home where the side of the metal was about 8 feet apart or so. Inconclusive, but very curious. You got a lot of contemporary sightings. It's just kind of a matter-of-fact thing to many people in the area. If you go up there around Liberty Hill, Lake Wateree, and you go in one of them baiting tackles around there in the country, and you mention the Wateree walking bear, somebody in there has a good chance to maybe heard of it. I like stuff like that. I think folklore, you know, often has a cause. And when my stepdad immediately that day ripped off, oh yeah, well, he's got a hat like Robin Hood, and he walks through the woods, snapping his fingers and whistling a groovy jazz tune. Now, you know, that just set my mind off because folklore has a way of explaining things like mythology and whatnot where people can just kind of relate to whatever it is. I mean, you give things the best explanation you got at the time sometimes. And that's what people related it to. And my stepdad and his brother, they've been hunting up there since the 60s. And it's just an ongoing thing with them. And like a joke, you know, it's like, no, the woods is dead today. I guess the old Wateree walking bear was around. Deer was hiding. Just kind of nonchalant about it. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the tale of the Wateree walking bear. It's a very interesting story that's certainly close to me, as a lot of people I know have some experience with that. And the way that I came in to find out about it was kind of a novel thing. But in the end, it taught me to be more open about my experience, that I had held so close and safeguarded that information, what my experience per se, for so many years. It taught me that it's good sometimes to speak your truth, even if you fear the ridicule, because sometimes other good things come out of that. Like, I would have never known about the Wateree walking bear. Well, maybe I would have, but probably not. I certainly would have never known about my mother, God rest her soul, and her experience that night in that mobile home up there at Lake Wateree. I would have never known about that if I hadn't just said, okay, even if I get ridiculed, I'm going to mention this to my mom and sit there. So that was a lesson for me. Don't be afraid to speak your truth. It helps other people come forward their truth too sometimes. I appreciate you joining me. Please join me again next time on Swamp Shadows, Tales from the Tupelos. Good night.